Hey, Mark, does packaging matter?
That's a great question, Dan. Hey, this is Mark Still at the Practical Still here with Dan Cavallari back in the garage, and we're going to talk about whiskey and packaging, and does it really matter? So, Dan, you tend to like Booker's, and there's a fair amount of packaging with Booker's. What do you think? Does it really matter?
Have I mentioned Booker's before?
I'm just guessing. You seem like a Booker's kind of guy. Not that you mention it every 4 or 5 minutes that we're talking about whiskey.
4 or 5 minutes, that's being kind to me. I am a big fan of Booker's, and it comes in this fancy little box here. That's a wooden box. I got one in front of me that's empty because I drink a lot of Booker's.
Yeah.
And it makes it look high class. It makes it look expensive, and it grabs your eye when it's sitting on the shelf, right? Because it's different than just the other glass bottles lining the shelves. So in a sense, it's doing its job, right? It's drawing your eye. But does it really matter to the flavor? Of course not.
That's the first part, right? It's marketing.
Right. But to the experience, I would argue that absolutely it matters.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, a little bit of you start getting into whiskey snobbery a little bit.
Is it snobbery at that point, though, or is it just...
Or enthusiasm?
Is enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So... I don't know if that's snobbery. It is, like you said, it is an experience. We talked about that before around glassware.
Sure.
You can drink whiskey at anything, but boy, a Glencairn makes a difference.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's snobbery, but that's certainly, I think, the first component is it's a marketing component.
Yeah.
Well, and in your case, it does the job.
Oh, absolutely. And as a side note for all of you, this is the third thing I'm mentioning this in just since we got to the garage tonight, but Mark finally got me the oration glass that I love so much. And so I may just launch into Shakespeare.
and just so, if you want to look, the oration glass's actual name is the Cradle Glass.
Yes.
I can't remember if it was Kuala Lumpur or Sri Lanka, but...
Well, you can go to cradleglass.com.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
And go straight there. We don't want to actually ever make any money with this nonsense. So go straight there, buy it. If you think about it, tell them you heard it on the Practical Still.
Yeah.
But enjoy the
crazy
glass.
guy Dan is really obsessed with this glass. So.
Yeah, and Booker's.
Yeah.
So step one, whiskey packaging is a marketing tool.
For sure.
To that extent, does it matter? It does. I guess it does. Who knows? If you pick, like Melissa, my wife likes to say, she picks a lot of wines based on the label.
Yeah, for sure.
So that can certainly matter.
Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest thing is now that whiskey has sort of had it's having its moment in the sun here in the United States. And so, a lot of these companies are probably just like, how do we stand out? How do we get people to even read what we're doing on our label? You have to get them to that bottle first. And so I think packaging in that sense is pretty important. The wooden box here is nice and everything for Booker's, and I have a lot of empty ones, and I save them because at some point I'm going to do something
you don't know what it is yet.
Store screws or something in them. I don't know. But what really sells me on it, honestly, is the whole experience of opening that box, because inside is this little guy, this little card.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is really nifty.
So tell us about the card. What's on the card?
So the card is, every batch of Booker's comes with a different card. And it basically is the batch story, which how much of it is BS, we don't know. But it's fun. It's so fun to read. While we were walking through the rick house and this barrel, the light of the heavens opened up and focused on this barrel, whatever. And then on the back is the distiller's notes with, what everything is in there. And I think it's just a nifty little thing. And I actually save these cards and I hang them above my workbench here in the garage. I
see that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had a couple that actually fell down in the wind the other day, but they're on the floor somewhere. But I think it's creating a narrative around the product, which I think I always say this, if you want somebody to think your product is great, you have to think your product is great. And so there's got to be this story behind it. And I think that narrative is really important, and that sets the tone for what is really going to eventually land in your glass and how you're going to perceive that. So is it coloring the experience? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I want it to? Absolutely.
Yeah. So as of yet, you and I have not got, of course, Booker unfortunately passed away years ago. Fred, his son, is the current master distiller, and his son, Freddie, is who's responsible for Little Book.
Yep.
But we don't get to talk to those guys yet.
Right.
We haven't done enough of these or well enough or whatever.
Yeah.
So I can see where the card can make a difference.
For sure.
Because these do come in batches, and they have batch numbers, but they also have those cool batch names like Beaten Biscuit or Teresa's Batch or whatever.
Country Ham.
Yeah, so getting to read about that, I think, is fair. Now, I agree with everything you said. I will certainly look at something based on packaging.
For sure.
But I kind of lean the other way.
Yeah.
And I lean, save me $5, keep the box,
Right.
keep the silly topper.
Yeah.
I do like a natural cork, though.
Sure.
FYI.
Well, that's
But
because you're wrong. No.
that's possible. It's possible. And even though I say that,
Yeah.
I will completely get sucked in and show up with the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like Booker's too. You've got the Blood Oath box sitting in front of us as
Yeah.
well, which is
Yeah.
gorgeous. It looks like it's been burned into the wood.
Yep. Yeah.
That's pretty slick. So I say all that. I say things like if I could just have a growler and go up to a barrel and let it out, that's what I do.
Sure.
But if you look at my shelf,
Yeah.
there's certainly some good packaging, and I'm
Right.
certainly influenced by that as well.
Yeah, and and I think there's drawbacks to the packaging too. Don't get me wrong. Like even Booker's, which I think is quite frankly a beautiful bottle. It's very shapely and everything. It's got the little ribbon on the front with the wax seal, just great. But also that wax seal drives me crazy.
We're on that together. And this is going to get us, if anybody actually ever listens, this will get us hate mail.
Yeah.
I hate bottle wax.
Oh, isn't it awful?
I absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come off right.
Yep.
And if you're a geek that saves and stores this stuff, that collects, and you talk about it, you're always talking about your cracked wax. It's just, so Maker's Mark, the Booker stuff, it just absolutely wears me out. It's hard to get it off the bottle. You pour, and there's little chunks of the wax going in there. I just soon leave it off.
There's a 100% chance if you buy a wax bottle, you're gonna
Drink some wax.
You're gonna eat some wax. Yeah.
and that's, to me, that's different than for every great glass of wine, you're going to go through some cork. I think that's a completely different thing.
Right.
So I wish they just quit the wax.
I agree. But I do think presentation matters in the sense of the experience. As far as taste, it's all glass, man. I mean, it's all the juice inside. I gotta use that word
God,
again.
you bum.
I need like a swear jar for every time I use the word juice.
So every time you use a word like juice, you got to pour me some whiskey.
Hey, I like that.
Yeah, which I just did because I didn't have any whiskey.
Bring it
to
on
drink.
over.
And the bottle I just poured has no wax on it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barrel Craft Spirits, for just putting the little paper thing that I can cut with my fingernail and open the bottle.
Yeah. Simple. Simple's good.
Yeah. All right. So we've established packaging matters. It's pretty on the shelf.
Yeah.
It's a marketing tool. It draws us to the story. But let's talk about things like, so for instance, recently I opened up and did a video on the Early Times bottle.
Yeah.
When you look at the Early Times bottle from shopping distance, 3 feet from the shelf, it's a cool bottle.
For sure.
But then you open it, you pull that plastic piece off the top and realize it's just a printed piece of plastic.
Yeah.
There's a black screw top under it. And once that top plastic's removed, that's just a plain old cheap thing with a decent looking little sticker on the front. But man, there's just nothing to it.
Right.
Does that bother you after the fact? I got to say, for the guy that said I don't care about packaging, it bugged the hell out of me.
Yeah, and I equate it to, right now we're sitting in my garage and I have about a gazillion bicycles. I'm a bicycle snob, and so it's when you get into bikes and you get to the top of the line, that's all you can ride, right?
Yeah.
And so you look down your nose at the stuff that's not top of the line, but then you get on the
You're insulting me.
I know. That's part of the fun of this, isn't it? Right?
Well, it was.
Yeah. No, but when you get on that other stuff that's not top of the line, you're like, oh, this works fantastic, and you get over that fact. That's where the equalizer is, right? So with that screw top, yes, there's a little bit of a put off feeling about it, and then you drink what's inside, and that's what matters. And that, I think, that got proven pretty perfectly when we did our blind testing not too long ago, and one of the best whiskeys of the night was that Evan Williams $15 bottle. You know?
Packaging doesn't get any cheaper than
exactly.
It's pretty cheap packaging.
Yeah. I mean, short of handing it to me in a paper cup,
So that's still a piece of what do I feel like going in, so it can affect it. But what about the bottles itself? So recently, we bought a bottle of wine that happened to be, I don't know why this glass was so thick and heavy, but it was.
Yeah.
And I speaking of bikes, had a bike wreck 20 years ago and gnarled up the top of my left thumb. I tend to pour left-handed. Big fat bottles cause me problems. No kidding. I mean, at 50-something years old, now it's hard to hang on to the bottle. So do bottle shapes matter from a function standpoint? Because to me, they do. I like the tall. Yeah, hit that. That's the Belle Meade cast strength. Yeah. I like the look of the tall, thin bottles. So that Smoke Wagon bottle, you've got all the E.H. Taylor bottles, the Eagle Rare bottles. they look cool, tall, thin. It's like the spaghetti Western look, the tall, thin look. But also because function, my hand hurts because of that bike crash. And so bottles like Rock Hill Farms, the big square bottle, I just can't hang on to it. I have to turn. Luckily, most left-handed people are slightly ambidextrous, so I can pour. You can too. Pour right-handed. But does that matter to you? Because I don't want to drop a real nice bottle. And sometimes they're fat and squatty. They're tall and skinny. They don't fit on the shelf right. I'm a nerd, so I'm trying to line things up on the top shelf.
Yeah.
Does that matter to you?
Well, yes, but for a different reason. I mean, aesthetically, it's cool to have those really tall bottles that look like they came out of a spaghetti Western, and John Wayne just ordered a 4-foot-long steak, And But for me, one of the things that I did when I got super nerdy about this, and I blame you for this, by the way.
I don't see how. I was there at the beginning, but how is that my fault?
It's totally your fault. I can't blame myself. I bought a barrel, a beer barrel, a couple of years ago, and I made a whiskey cabinet out of it. My good friend Neil is a welder, Dirty Hands Fabrication, and he made some beautiful shelves for inside. So I cut it open. And I made a whiskey cabinet. Well, I didn't measure right, which should shock exactly nobody.
So you measured none, drank some.
Yeah.
And here you are.
Yeah. Measure twice, drink twice, I think is the old saying. Yeah. And so the bottom shelf only fits bottles of a certain height. So actually, and I kind of hate to admit this, but sometimes when I go shopping for whiskey, I think, all right, I need a short bottle. So,
that's worse than us buying wine based on the label. You're buying whiskey based on the height of the bottle to fit on your shelf.
I got to bring a tape measure with me.
That's good.
But, in terms of actual pouring function for me, it really doesn't matter until you get to bottles like the Willet Pot Still. Which is actually a difficult bottle to pour.
Yeah.
So, I bought a bottle of the Pot Still because I was like, well, I have to have that on my shelf. But honestly, I'm dreading the day I have to pour that.
I have a 175 of that. It's going to take two people in a funnel to pour that in the glass. The other one that killed me was I.W. Harper. Which it's a beautiful decanter type bottle, but it's square and it's wide, and so the pour spout's set way back. And basically you just kind of have to take an eyeball on it and go for it, and splash whiskey.
And hope for the best.
So bottle shapes can matter.
Yeah,
I think that's clear. So what else matters in packaging? I mean, at that point, like you said, once it's glass, the whiskey doesn't mature any once it's in the glass.
Right.
So the shape or the color can matter, I suppose. I mean, whiskey doesn't like sunlight,
right?
So a darker bottle can help do that. But what else about packaging? Like, what do you do with all the packaging? There's only been one bottle I wish I had back. Yeah. And if you have ever seen the Hibiki, it's a Japanese whiskey.
Right.
I had the inexpensive. Well, it was not inexpensive. It was a gift, but it wasn't the aged version. But it was the Hibiki Harmony bottle.
Yeah.
Gorgeous with the crystal stopper. I wish I had saved that.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, what do you do with all these bottles? What do you do with the boxes? You're saving the boxes. What the hell are you going to do with it?
Well, so I had this idea that I was going to build a wine rack with them, actually. Glue them together in a sort of a grid pattern, like a honeycomb kind of pattern, and make a wine rack out of them. So saving them, and I'm also, again, we're in my garage. It's a project garage. I've got a motorcycle in pieces behind Mark right now. I got bikes on the wall. I got wood over here. So I'm a project guy, which means I always have small parts. So I do use them for a little while. Actually, I think it's this exact box. I was storing my one of my tools in here, my little router tool. So they're good for storage. They're good for screws, things like that. But I think it's just so attractive, and I find myself saving bottles that I really like that are different. So, for example, like the High West, they do the Midsummer Night's Dram. And I hung on to that bottle for the longest time because it's just so beautiful. And I didn't know what to do with it. And so I ended up buying wax and wicks and making candles, which I thought was really neat. And I did that for a few bottles, but I kept cracking the bottles.
Yeah.
So I haven't quite figured that out. But
that bottle will be tough, too, because it's
textured.
It looks like a 200-year-old glass that's run because glass isn't really solid.
Right.
I imagine it'd be tough to cut.
Yeah.
And by the way, I have with me a bottle of Rendezvous.
Yeah, the High West.
From High West. So
so, bottles like that. And honestly, this Smoke Wagon, it's a gorgeous bottle.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. So, like, I'm going to have one.
Okay. All right. You're holding it up.
Yeah.
For those besides Dan and I who can't see.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful bottle in the sense that it's got, I don't know what's that, flowers all over it.
looks like
It's
a
embossed
vine.
into the glass, and there's a setback piece with a wax medallion in it, which is wax is okay because it's not part of opening the bottle.
Right.
But then there's this, I don't know how to describe this, absolutely cheap gold foil label at the bottom.
It is a little hokey, but
It's it's absolutely hokey.
But you know what though? You got to remember, Smoke Wagon. They're out of Vegas. This is Vegas all the way.
It is absolutely Vegas all the way. Okay, so appropriate marketing then.
And I love Vegas. Don't get me wrong. I love going to Vegas. And this is exactly. It's just such this. It's gaudy in a way. But I
It
think,
is gaudy.
But it works. I think anyway.
Is that a? This is now I'm going to reveal myself. Is that a natural cork or a synthetic cork?
Let's check. Hold on. That is
Synthetic. No, that's natural. Natural cork.
Is it?
Yeah, isn't it?
It's hard to tell. Kind of looks.
Oh, that's natural cork for
Is
sure.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Or a very good synthetic cork.
Hey, so the guy knows what he's doing.
But
By the way, his Instagram feed is hilarious. By the way, you have to watch
the Smoke Wagon guy?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
It's hysterical.
Yeah.
But I do save the bottles and I do save the boxes until I either get fed up and throw them away because they're taking up space, or until I use them for something. So
I
there
don't
is
know
that.
what I use them for. So there is a dark and nefarious part of bottles. Mm-hmm. If you have some of the unicorn bottles,
Yeah.
those sell on eBay and Craigslist for big money because counterfeiters will use them. So I will not
Sell them.
sell them or just easily throw without destroying the bottles like that. And I don't have many of them. Unfortunately, I haven't run across many of those, but I still have kept my old Rip Van Winkle 10-year-old bottle.
Yeah.
I could sell it for $80, but some jackwagon's going to fill that up
it.
with special reserve,
Yeah.
reseal it, and try and sell it as
Right.
new. So I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I tell you, with bottles, the only reason I don't throw them out right away is because the neighbors, they're just going to see all that rattling around the trash can. They're going to go, I live next to a trunk.
Yeah, but when you're howling outside without a shirt, they already know.
So
man.
there's other hints that they're living next to. But I don't know, man. I don't want to keep those. And when we do whiskey night at my house, I put water in a couple of those. But it's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
the Kentucky Owl bottles
Yeah.
because I just love those big, proud bottles.
Right.
But other than that, I just don't want to keep them.
That's caught my fancy too, like just having them for water on the
Yeah.
table. Somebody else I saw on Instagram. Instagram is kind of like Pinterest. Like, these are great ideas that I will never do. But I saw a friend of mine, or a friend of a friend, really. But she was putting them, filling them with water. Her empty bourbon bottles, and hers was a bottle of early times. She filled it with water and put it upside down in her planter, and that fed. It's like it was a slow flow of water
Nice.
for her planter. I thought it was brilliant.
And that helps the neighbors too. They know for sure.
Yeah, you just
They're
advertise.
not sure if you just dropped it in there or you meant to do
Yes.
it on purpose.
I'm feeding my posies whiskey. Yeah.
All right.
so-
Okay, I can see some of that.
Yeah.
I think there's a guy in the local whiskey group that does the candles.
Yeah.
And he does a really good job with them.
Yeah.
And that certainly
Better than me.
satisfies the
Yeah.
don't give away those bottles for
Yeah.
he cuts the top off of them, so
Yep.
they're no good for that anymore anyway.
It's hard. I mean, they do add up, and part of me, I'm kind of a little bit of a hippie, so I feel bad about throwing anything away. If I can reuse it, I want to, which is why I've got 12 freaking Booker's boxes.
But
around
that brings
here.
us back to my thing of, can I just bring my own bottle and hit the barrel myself?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you ever saw that old episode of The Simpsons where just Moe leaves the tavern, and so Barney just puts his face under the tap and just.
I'm talking about a bottle of my own, not
Yeah.
my face.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be great. I think there's so many laws around it that
Yeah.
would prevent that, but it does seem a shame to waste, and maybe that's part of the problem with whiskey packaging, is that it does seem a shame to waste some of this stuff. Like these Booker's boxes, 99% of people are going to chuck it, and so in that sense, like, the packaging is a detriment in a lot of ways.
Well, but I mean, other than that little plastic sliding front glassy clear piece, the rest of that box would degrade.
Well, it's
wood.
treated, but it's treated with a stain. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about that.
It would certainly go in the fireplace.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but
A sacrifice.
Yeah. But I think it's, generally speaking, and I've railed against this in my day job. Like, excess packaging drives me crazy. Why is it different for whiskey. Well, part of that is that it's going to sit on my shelf for a long time, or it's going to sit on in my whiskey cabinet for a long time. So as something that's kind of a centerpiece of my basement right now, I'd prefer it to look nice.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just kind of like you mentioned with the height in your shelf, my shelf, same way.
Yeah.
I left room at the top of the shelf, the 3 different levels for the tall bottles, but down below in the cabinet, not so much luck. And so I had to carefully figure out where the shelves go. So I'm not as worried about that.
You have adjustment.
Yeah.
You're lucky.
The original deal with my wife was once I filled that up, I have to stop.
Right. And you filled that up last year.
I did not stop.
Yeah. Or an option B.
Well, one of the upsides of the last few months is I've not been roaming liquor stores like I had in the past. So I certainly have worked down a little bit.
But you gave me all of your bad habits, so now that's what I do.
So that's not all my fault.
Yeah, it's mostly your fault. Yeah.
I enable.
Like 89%, we'll say. 88.
I don't buy that at all.
Right.
That's no different than the packaging. We could have a whole podcast on how much am I a problem for you?
Well, this comes down to how much personal responsibility I want to take for my own decisions.
Yes, well, I can't help you with that.
Yeah, that's problematic.
All right, so marketing package matters. To me, the shape matters just because I'm old and my hand hurts. There's certainly something to be said for how much of this packaging ends up hanging around. Maybe you could even argue that the prettier the packaging, the more of it hangs around versus getting recycled.
Fair enough.
And if bottles were ugly and cheap, we'd just recycle them, and that'd be better for everybody involved.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the night of drinking that I do. But.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I don't know. Bourbon in the industry's old, and I don't think until the last 10 years anybody ever expected the collection of bottles of American whiskey like we have now.
Right.
So certainly I don't think anybody thought, certainly in the 60s, 70s, 50s, nobody cared about recycling or what the environment was like. That was just you do it and you move on. So maybe it'll adjust in the future.
Yeah, and I think these things are circular like anything else, right? Or cyclical, I guess is the better word. Is like for me at this point in my snobbery, the stage of snobbery I'm in, I would love to have like an old bottle that's just plain. And like the old label just has whiskey like misspelled, just something plain. I mean, I think that's also got its own charm. So I think, it really depends on I guess how you present your whiskey, how invested you are into the whole experience of bourbon and whiskey, and that really matters if it's just sort of like a tangential, every once in a while thing of your life. You usually probably tuck that into some cabinet that's closed anyway.
Yeah.
But for those of us who are deep down the rabbit hole and it's out in the open, it becomes a conversation piece and it becomes something you can talk about with friends. And I think that's fun. I think
so. We're back to the experience.
Yeah.
It does matter, I think.
Yeah, I think so. At least to an extent.
Yeah. Well, it's the experience. It's the enjoyment of it. It's the topic. I mean, these days you say whiskey, and if somebody's not into it, they ask questions, even if they're only on the outside. So maybe it matters, I guess, in the grand scheme of enjoying it.
Well, I mean, just to give an example. So I have a friend who is he likes whiskey a lot, and in the sense that he is a passive fan. Like he's not the guy that goes to liquor stores and hunts for stuff. But whenever I've brought something out, he's very appreciative of it. And I brought out a bottle of the Booker's, and he said, "Oh, whoa," and it was this moment, and he loved it, And so for Booker's, that's exactly what they want to hear, right? The presentation precludes the actual taste of the whiskey.
Sure.
If I had handed that to him just in a glass without presenting the bottle, would it have been the same experience? No. Probably not.
Yeah, no way.
Right. And so Booker's is in his head as like a thing. So I think that's...
So you've done your job.
I did. I infected him. Yeah. Booker's, you can sponsor me at any moment. I have a question for you, Mark.
All right.
Part of packaging is the cork. Yeah, and or the topper, I guess you would say, or the
cork topper, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it, because not everything.
Well, toppers. That would be the generic, I guess.
I get excited when I get really cool cork toppers, and I'll tell you why in a minute, because it has nothing to do with the whiskey itself.
Okay,
but I want to hear your take on real cork versus synthetic.
Yeah, so I'm a real cork guy, and it's not anything functional. Because really what we want, especially if you're going to have 14, 15 open, not that I have, 20 open bottles of whiskey at my house. But if you had that, oxidation and the air that gets in the bottle is a big deal.
Yeah.
So the better the seal, the better. So from a practical standpoint, and I think Weller does the best job of this. Up until recently, the old antique was a screw top, just like Special Reserve and 12-year. That screw top with that little bit of plastic on the top probably makes the best seal. But it doesn't sound, I mean, who wants to listen to the, I don't have a screw top here. Yeah, you don't want to, very good. You don't want to listen to that.
Yeah.
And so the next thing would be synthetic cork. It probably seals up well. Obviously, no air gets through a piece of plastic or whatever that they make that out of. But boy, when you take those out, they don't sound good.
Right.
And so I am a natural cork fan only because it just sounds so good.
Yeah.
And whiskey is full of stories and full of history. And that's to me, that's a natural cork.
Yeah.
Now, you shouldn't be storing your whiskey on its side where the cork stays wet.
Right.
If you, for some reason, do that, which makes no sense at all, then you want a screw top.
Right.
Because that, nothing to worry about, or a synthetic cork.
Yeah.
But I really like that. And if we have, check the Bellmead.
Let's see here.
I think that's
definitely
synthetic. Okay, so hand me that. Put the cork back in. Hand me that.
Okay.
So here's, and this is ridiculous. If this doesn't tell you that I think packaging or non-tasting whiskey stuff matters, it's this. So here's a bottle of Bellmead cast strength. It's about half, a little less than half full.
Which is very good, by the way.
It's pretty tasty.
Drinking
Pretty
right
tasty.
now.
I'm going to uncork this guy. And we're going to listen to the sound. Yeah. That was it. If you heard it wasn't much to it.
Pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I'll try it again. I'm getting real close to the mic. That's it.
I think you're getting drowned out by suburbia behind you.
Well, there's not much of a sound.
Yeah.
And I am about the experience. So here is, and by the way, Dan and I just recorded before we started the podcast, a little open the bottle video on the Barrel Craft Spirits Dovetail release. This has a nice, rather fat opening, but it's a natural cork. So let's listen to that. Oh, that is fabulous. Now, if we talk about packaging, all that packaging happens right before that noise happens.
Yeah.
And when I don't know what happens, but when I hear that,
it's exciting.
I almost feel it.
Yeah.
The hair stands up on the arm.
It's visceral, right?
I'm expecting something wonderful.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's probably going to be better than it would have been otherwise. Right. So for that reason alone, I'm a fan of natural cork. Now, when you say topper, you got to consider the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so there are brands that spend an awful lot of effort.
Yeah, the Rare Breed looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's got a nice, cool little wood topper on it. But a lot of brands spend a lot of money on that. And probably the most, and I'm not going to use the word because then we'd be even on the
juice.
Stupid term thing. But Blanton's has the little horse on top with the letter that spells Blanton's if you collect them all.
Right.
That looks cool, but that's part of the packaging discussion. But do I care about that? I don't know. I've got a pile of those things. I don't do anything with them.
Right.
But that's certainly I don't mind Blanton's. I think it's pretty good whiskey. I enjoy drinking it.
Right.
But if you could charge me $5 less and leave the little horsey off, that'd be fine with me.
Yeah.
But it's a natural cork.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm after.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think it's a coincidence that, I mean, even in the Rare Breed here, you got some Wild Turkey Rare Breed.
Yep.
And then the Barrel, I mean, both of those are natural corks. And lo and behold, those corks are very prominently shown off.
Correct.
Through the clear.
They don't hide that.
Yeah.
For one thing, they don't hide it in wax.
Yeah. Which, like, again, like a lot of natural corks get hidden behind wax, and I don't get it.
So I think, and I don't know the chemistry behind it. I hope to never have a bottle open so long that it matters what kind of material from that perspective is in there. Sure. But I can tell you that just from the visceral part of the experience, and maybe this just realigns me with the whole packaging debate, it matters to me.
Well,
and
that's a sensory interplay, right? Like you smell something and your taste matters, and you taste something and your smell matters, and the whole sensory experience matters. And you've said this before, like, it depends on where you taste a whiskey for the first time. You don't like to taste it in a bar. Yeah,
for sure.
And that matters, right? Because everything else that you're perceiving outside of your taste influences the taste itself.
Yeah, you definitely want to be in a garage.
Yeah.
Next to a half assembled motorcycle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, but that's fair. And I didn't think we'd head towards, I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't think we'd head towards toppers or corks or whatever. But for me, from a packaging standpoint, if we talk about corks, it absolutely matters.
For sure.
Yeah.
And just as a stupid side note, so Mark knows that we're sitting beneath shelves of wood. So occasionally I dabble in woodwork, and I subscribe to a magazine called Fine Woodworking, and this brilliant suggestion was save your corks from wine bottles. And like, I can never save a wine bottle cork because I always destroy them. Mm-hmm. But whiskey bottle corks are pretty stout, and so what I use them for is, I have files. And they have little pointy ends where you can slot them into handles.
Files in a cabinet, but files
like actual files,
rasps
and files, and you can stick those corks on the end of the file, and it makes a beautiful handle.
How about that?
Yeah. So I actually I have a collection of them in my.
So I imagine you're going and buying new files.
Yeah.
Just to justify all the whiskey corks.
Well, I got to buy a file so I can buy a new bottle of whiskey. And I got to buy a new bottle of whiskey so I can buy a file.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it feeds.
Good.
It feeds
so
off each other.
You didn't even hear it. That's how bad the synthetic cork was in that Bellmead. I poured some of that because we're halfway through that bottle. It's better than it was in the beginning, but I don't think any cork would save that for me.
I'm not like fanboy of this whiskey, but I will say this: it's got a really good mouthfeel.
It does.
It's very coaty.
I think when because I owe a video on that going back to it, and I think the way I look at that is, and if you're old enough, and not young people don't typically think of equalizers the way old guys do. I mean, I remember
I'm a young.
You are young, yeah. So let me explain it to you. My Uncle Jerry, moved to Germany in the Air Force, came back with this gigantic. Here, let the pipes.
Yeah, that's some true suburbia right there. There it goes. They say the suburbs are peaceful.
Let's hope he hasn't been drinking.
Yeah.
But if motorcycles had mouthfeel, that one would have coated the mouth quite nicely. Yeah. So Uncle Jerry went off to Germany, came back with this gigantic Marantz stereo system and Bose 901 speakers with the great big equalizer.
Yeah.
I don't know how many different frequencies this thing would do, but it was a ton of them. So when I'm drinking the Bellmead, and I think this, I don't want to generalize too bad, but when I'm drinking MGP whiskey, there are certainly some really good whiskeys that come out of that distillery.
For sure, yeah.
For sure, it's quality.
Yeah.
But to me, if you look at that equalizer, if you go to the low end and the high end, those sliders are down low.
Yeah.
And the ones in the middle, a lot of mids going on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great things to be. Geddy Lee's bass tone.
Yeah.
A lot of mid in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things about mids.
Yeah.
But then if you go looking at other things, maybe some Four Roses, single barrels, some different Old Foresters, those end pieces, those sliders on the end, those low frequencies and highs, they're back up a little higher, and there's a little more going on.
The MGP is a little Motley Crue, and
it feels like it to me. And I don't pretend to be the palate, but that's what it feels like to me. So I enjoy it.
Yeah.
At the right price point, I buy it all day.
Yeah.
But that's where that comes in there.
Well, we started our conversation tonight with a discussion about Motorhead, and I feel like this is a good. We've come full circle.
But back to packaging. So I think for different reasons, we both think packaging matters. It certainly makes it fun.
Yeah.
And if you're not having fun with your whiskey, you're doing it wrong for sure.
Yeah.
Which I know I just cast aspersions on a bunch of people that are just stockpiling hundreds of bottles. It's not that I wouldn't like to have all those, but the whiskey's for drinking and sharing with friends. And look, you do what you want to do with it, but I know you and I have our friendship's grown through whiskey that way.
For sure.
We've brought other people into the fold. From that perspective, if we're having whiskey night and there's cool bottles on the table, it matters.
Yeah, we're going to crack that open, yeah.
I'm certainly not going to complain about cool packaging anymore. And thank you for bringing it up. I'm absolutely not going to complain about natural corks.
Right.
that means something to me. I think you guys, if you go watch the YouTube videos, they open the bottle. I mean, you can tell that matters to me when that happens. So it's important.
Yeah. I think the experience is more important than all of it. And I think when we get together and have all those bottles on the table and something stands out, and we all have a great time, drinking that bottle, that's huge.
One little piece I think 100% I'd be willing to get rid of are the box, the big boxes, not the Booker's box.
Like the
Wild Turkey.
Boxes.
The Wild Turkey Master's Keep series.
Yeah.
Love the whiskey.
Yeah.
But gee, many Christmas, those great big, what am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
I mean, how do I display it? I feel bad throwing it away.
Right.
for sure on those. I would love to save $5 or $4 or whatever those bottles cost. Those boxes cost at scale.
Right.
Just
Well,
leave those
and
out.
as a general rule, I mean, cardboard and plastic.
Yeah,
you know,
and Scotch often comes in a really thin cardboard box, which just makes me nervous carrying that around. Is it going to fall out
it
the
gonna
bottom?
fall at the bottom?
And maybe we even talk about the whiskey tubes that
Yeah.
the bottles come in.
right, like E.H. Taylor.
Yeah, it's the same. It's almost the same dimensions except
Yeah.
for the neck. Why do I need the tube? Just
Right.
forget that. Save me 20 cents even.
Yeah.
Just don't do the tube.
Yeah, I think packaging for the sake of packaging is a different story.
Yeah.
You know, that to me doesn't add anything to the
Maybe it
experience.
helps the distiller distributor because now they've got a uniform
Right.
whatever
cachet,
form,
yeah.
a uniform form to pack in. But I mean, that's just I don't care about that. stuff.
No, I think packaging for the sake of packaging is it's garbage.
To me, the only thing those tubes are good for is I take 2 Glencairns and some paper towels, and I can put 2 of them in there and throw them in my suitcase and travel with them and save.
see, even that.
But
even
I've used one of those for 10 years.
Yeah,
I don't need any more.
you don't need it anymore. Yeah.
There you go. Cool. All right. So I think that's it. Packaging matters. We matter. It's an experiential thing for us. It's not about, although we do occasionally get tipsy, it's not about that. It's about the experience and experiencing the liquid in the bottle.
For sure.
But it does matter a little bit. And but if you think any different, or if you have an opinion about packaging, let us know at thepracticalstill.com. There's an ask button.
Yes.
You can ask us questions about that. Check out the YouTube channel, The Practical Still. Give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down, tell us what's going on. But we'd love to know what you think. And we've gotten some comments lately, and that's been great, so we appreciate that. But let us know what you think. Dan, anything else before we close it out?
I think we have solved the problem of packaging.
I think all I figured out was I really like natural corks.
Yeah, and I like food in boxes. Really.
So corks and boxes is all we really care about.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, it was fun. Good to be in the garage again.
Yeah, cheers. to
Next
that.
time. Cheers.
All right.